Hi everyone, and welcome to the first week of the Open Hardware Leaders. We wanted to start this first week with a warm welcome again, and wanted to go through some important aspects of the program that we think you should have at the back of your head on each week, right? So today we're going to talk briefly about the program structure and how it is designed. What key resources and tools you have, which you are already a bit familiar with, and yeah, the next steps to follow up. So don't worry about the technical aspects, because we know that there's a lot of enthusiasm about technical stuff like programming, learning Git, or how to handle GitHub. That is very important, but technology is always improving and it's always changing. Nevertheless, knowledge and concepts keep constant, or they are quite steady. So we want to actually reinforce those aspects. So what is the big picture of the program? The backbone of the program is to help you guys realize ideas and turn them into learnings and developments and products, right? So we want you to go through the steps of having a thought or a requirement in mind and scoping it in a way that allows you to progress in your particular project. So we think that the whole process of development and technology is a constant learning process. You are always learning about your project, about your product, if it actually fits the requirement, if it's actually well adopted by the community of users, so on and so forth, right? So that is a key thing to keep in mind. How is the program designed? I think you already know a bit about it, but we want to reinforce again that the mentors and the experts will help you guys, the mentees, to tailor a learning path for your specific project, and that is very important. Each week we try to provide focus models, best practices, and resources so that you can make little steps in your project and acquire new knowledge each week, right? So that's also important, and it is also very important that you have exchange with your peers, because this is a very community-oriented kind of program where you will get the best out of it if you exchange resources. You learn from the other teams, and we also learn from you and the rest of the team. So it's a collective learning experience. But the first challenge in all projects, I think, or in many projects, is what to prioritize and focus on, because there are so many things that you can do. There are so many possibilities, and a big challenge is to scope a step or a milestone in your project and move forward and build step by step. That is really a challenge even for me today, so we want to focus on that as well. And there comes the question where to start. Okay, in your project you might want to learn, or you might want to build progress on top of, is it your product or your project relevant or not for the community? If it works well or not, if it functions well or not. Or you might want to learn about which people can back up your project that you don't know about. And for each of these, let's say, questions or unknowns that you have in your project, it's good that you have some kind of iteration, or let's say experiment or research that allows you to actually find out about those questions. And we wanted to give you a first aid kit, the simplest model in open hardware that we can kind of wrap or explain. And you are probably familiar already with this image of the value proposition, but basically something that is constant for every open hardware project is that anyone can find it online, anyone can access, replicate, and build the hardware you are designing, and they can also study and learn from it. So why is it important? Because people have different options. They can either buy the product, or they can just buy the components, or they can do almost everything from scratch. And that is really useful for different contexts. So some people might want to just buy it. Some people don't have the money to buy everything, so they go for replication, or they want to design something new. And this flexibility allows also the improvement of knowledge, and that people can actually learn about design and engineering, and many people can participate in the process of technological development. So this is, I guess, is common for every open hardware project, and it's like the generic value proposition, if you like. And then you also want to ask the question, who is benefiting from this in your specific project? Say, for instance, the solar projects or the auto DIY kit, or many of the other projects that we have in this program. You always have to answer the questions of who is it for, the community or users or people that use this product, what kind of activities they want to perform, and what problems they face now, what limitations they have now, and what things they would like to improve or they would like to see improved in the future. So that is also an important component. And I wanted to talk also a bit about the prototypical actor in open source, something that is very common in many projects, and it's what is called the lead user. So a lead user is always someone that wants to have a certain kind of product and has the capacity to kind of implement it or find a way of realizing that product. And you can find that in many cases, including Linux, Prusa, the RepRap project, Arduino, Python, and many more. If you look into the history of open source project, this is very common, which means that, for instance, many of you are doing projects that where you are kind of a lead user, it might be, or not, but in the case where you are lead users, you are in a very nice position, because you kind of know your product, you kind of envision the pains and gains that it has, and you also have some kind of capacity to do it. So I recommend you to check out a bit of references of the history of projects like Linux, Python, Prusa, or Arduino, and you'll find out that this is very common. So I give you these slides later so that you can read more about it. And we want to briefly jump into the open canvas, because the open canvas is the map that will kind of help you to navigate your projects, because when you are working in an open source project, you want to make sure that you have this constantly updated and validated as well. So for each of these aspects, you always need to work in your particular project, and the goal of this program is to kind of fulfill each of these elements of the canvas, and that's why we encourage you to actually use it as a tool. And you'll find out also that each of the aspects of the value propositions are related to different elements of the canvas. So this is also a way to summarize or understand how these two tools are related. So these are just examples of what we're going to be doing, and probably many of the things we're going to be focusing on is on these aspects of the canvas, because many of you have already worked on these aspects. So you're going to be validating a lot of this, but we're also going to try to support you a lot in these aspects of opening up your project. And the other thing we wanted to try to support you with and facilitate you with is in validating your idea. So let's say you have an idea about how to build something, or that a certain feature of your project is important. You need to actually design an experiment or a test or a prototype that allows you to make sure that you're actually aiming for the right functionality or for the right approach to your community. So whatever whatever aspect you're focusing on in your project. And then you have a learning card, which is actually capturing the results of these prototypes or tests that you do, and find out what did you learn from that. So it's basically a very straightforward scientific way of doing things. And yeah, we give you a slide with some of the 10 prototyping principles that will allow you to actually think of validation experiments. So yeah, you will see, I'll leave you the slide so you can check the details later. But this is an example when we are talking about tests and validations. For instance, in this particular hardware project, these are different tests or experiments that you might want to do in a hardware project. So some are analytical prototypes done in CAD or CAM, and others are actually physical prototypes. And each of those allow you to find out something about your project that you don't know or that you're not sure about, and actually share those results with the community. So we have gone quickly around the different aspects of the project, but everything comes down to this. You have your canvas and your value proposition canvas, and you want to extract hypotheses from there that you can then prioritize based on priorities. And those priorities are related to, can you do it now? Is it the first thing to do, or should something follow up later? So on and so forth. When you have these kind of ideas clustered and organized, you can start designing experiments or tests that will allow you to do incremental steps, right? And then you also want to prioritize them, because you don't want them to do them all at the same time. So you want to then, of course, build and deliver some of your experiments, tests, etc., and capture learnings that allow you to make progress. So that's basically the dynamics of this course. So we recommend you to use the canvas to generate ideas, but also to have a checklist of what are the areas you need to improve in your project. We also we think that you can use it as a way to capture your vision and communicate to community members or partners or people that want to support you, and also as a way to scope the areas of your project that demand of more attention at a certain point. So yeah. We are also going to be trying to give you a lot of tips, tricks, tools, and resources in these aspects, which are mostly focused on community building and opening up your project, documenting it, etc. So we would like to also stress a bit the importance of time and scope, because you can only go so far with your project. So this is a very challenging aspect. And this slide summarizes in a very packed way, but I would say relevant, how the short term relates to the long term. And you can find here what we mean by short and long term. Normally, you want to have in the short term small validations or small releases of your product and increments that are kind of predictable. On the other hand, you always want to have on your horizon a more futuristic and perhaps vague or flexible perspective or vision of your project. And you can constantly evolve and zoom in and zoom out in your project. So this slide is very interesting because it scopes, it talks about two different scopes, the time scope and the, let's say, the relevant scope or the focus of your work. So I hope it also helps you to use it in your project. And again, this one summarizes that you should have like a vision of your product, but then you should break that down into little steps that allows you to do increments and even releases of your hardware project. So if you haven't heard about Scrum, it's a nice tool to allow you to do this easily. So the summary of today, based on what we just talked, is that whatever idea you have in your project, whatever assumptions you made, you need to test them. You need to make sure that you are aiming for the right targets, that you're scoping your project properly. And that demands of creativity and critical thinking at the same time. So translating your ideas into actionable steps, small experiments, and partial validations will help you a lot. And I think it's a craft that makes a difference in your project. So again, consider which are your main targets at the moment and why do you think these are your main targets. and use scope boxing. So the amount of things that you want to consider in these first iterations, and the time that you're going to spend doing these increments to make your project more predictable and easy to manage as a team. I hope this kind of summarizes what I just showed. And I guess you already know that filling in the canvas is important. That there are some slides, there are some resources in the website. You should come up with your ideas and hypotheses to move forward in your project. And I guess a very important aspect of our goal in this week is that you finish your value proposition and make the exercise with your team, and do the same also with the open canvas. Then there are some questions. Can you actually translate those ideas into next steps, into things that you can actually build or let's say research about? So you don't have to do this this week, but it's good that you already start thinking about if your ideas are concrete enough to test, if you are actually generating ideas that are testable and you can actually research about them or not. So that's also an interesting thing to consider. Then you might want to think about which one you want to prioritize and why, and discuss it with the team and your mentor as well. And another interesting one is what aspects of your project remain unknown or vague or insufficiently validated at the moment, because that is something you want to focus on in your project to take it to the next level. Thank you very much. Hope to see you soon and that you are enjoying the program so far.